Women's Health West would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land which we are all on today. This land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to all community members listening today. So I'd like to say hello and welcome you to our very first recording of this series of podcasts for Melton's Lifelong Learning Festival. My name's Sarah and I use the pronouns she and her, and I'm a sexual and reproductive health coordinator at Women's Health West.
And hi everyone, my name is Susan. I work with Sarah at Women's Health West. My pronouns are also she and her, and I'm the team leader for sexual and reproductive health at Women's Health West.
Thanks, Susan. So the two of us are here today to talk about the introduction of sexuality and how to have conversations with your children about this topic, and also to discuss the importance of having these conversations. We're joined today by Rashika, a health promotion coordinator at Women's Health West, and she's going to share with us some insight on this topic.
Hey Rashika, welcome and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for inviting me, Sarah and Susan. So my pronouns are also she and her. I'm so excited to be talking about this topic with the both of you. I think it's such an important topic, talking about sex and sexuality with children and young people. So I've been brought up in an environment where you can't really openly talk about this with parents or family members. So I feel really passionate about letting future generations feel comfortable in talking about this topic.
Thanks, Rashika. Sarah, before we start, I wonder if it would be helpful to clarify what we mean when we're talking about sexuality, because it's more than just sex, isn't it?
Absolutely, Susan. I don't think many people think of sexuality as and really acknowledging like how much it actually impacts and how much of our lives it makes up. I think when people think of sexuality, they think of sex or maybe sexual orientation and who people are attracted to. But I find it's a lot easier to think of sexuality as a broad concept. It's a huge part of who we are, and it's something which everyone experiences very differently. It's definitely more than just sex. Our health, our gender, our bodies, reproduction, relationships, who we're attracted to, and how we feel physically and emotionally all come under the umbrella of sexuality. And sexuality is something that we express every day, and we see it in the way that we interact with people, how we feel and see ourselves. It's our values, our behaviours, our attitudes. It just makes up so much of who each of us are. And that's why I think it's so important that children have opportunities to talk about their sexuality. And I think parents have a really important role here, because it's so much more than just talking about sex. It's a huge part of children and young people's lives. And the more that it's talked about, the more comfortable parents and children will be able to have these conversations. And it's really important that your child knows that they have an open and supportive person to talk to. They feel that they can come to and have conversations in a safe space.
Thanks, Sarah. So obviously there's many reasons why parents might feel reluctant to talk to children or young people around sex and sexuality. They're worried about talking about it too soon. Will this be confusing? Will it be inappropriate? Do I even know the answers to the questions that young people might have? And it just can feel awkward and embarrassing, because most of us haven't actually been taught or encouraged to speak about these things freely with others. So it's completely natural and normal to feel a little reluctant. But the truth of the matter is, it's really very, very important to have these conversations with young people. And Sarah, as someone, I suppose, who has these conversations with young people quite a lot, I wonder, what do you think children and young people need from their parents and from other trusted adults to support them in their development around sex and sexuality?
Thanks, Susan. Yeah, I sort of gathered this from conversations that I've had with young people, but also just observing things and being a young person at one point in my life as well, is that children and young people are going to be naturally curious about their bodies and their feelings. Especially during puberty, there's so many changes going on that it's normal that kids will have questions to ask their parents, and parents have a real opportunity here to be a person and a trusted source of information that young people can go to make sure that they're not experiencing these uncertainties alone. And they deserve to have information about their bodies and their feelings and to know their rights. This will really help them to make healthy choices throughout their life. And I guess it's not really understood well, or it's not really perceived this way, but children are capable of learning so much about their sexuality that isn't sex. So things about bodies and pleasure and consent and relationships and how to interact with people and how to treat people. Having these conversations with your children can really help prepare them for later experiences in life, like entering relationships or going through the changes of puberty. And I find a really helpful question for parents to ask themselves is, what do you want for your children in their sexual lives? I mean, I can imagine that the answer will include that they have respectful relationships, they've got autonomy over their bodies, your children will know their rights, and they can access quality healthcare services, as well as your children being able to honestly express who they are and to feel safe and supported as they go through some experiences that might feel a bit overwhelming or concerning. But we do know that these things don't magically happen. We learn ways to help make them happen, and that's through education. But it's also through how those around us shape our beliefs towards these issues. And if parents are around their children and they're validating their experiences of sexuality and they're helping their children feel as though their emotions and questions matter, this is going to help your child feel more confident advocating for themselves when it comes to their health and relationships later on in life.
Thanks, Sarah. What about you, Rashika? What do you think supportive involvement from parents might look like?
Yeah, sure. But I think we've touched on some really great points so far. I think it's important that we think of sex just like any other part of life, you know, instead of taboo or scary. I mean, I know this is easy to say because the word sex has so many negative connotations and, you know, I think we're conditioned sometimes to see it as a bad word. But I guess this is where we can try and flip the word around into a positive. So we want to talk about sexuality in a positive way. So this will let children and young people know that they deserve positive experiences when it comes to things such as, you know, the way they view their bodies, the way people treat them, and to feel more comfortable and confident asking for help if they need it. If we only talk about the negative things that can happen, or if you make it seem like things such as like erections or periods are taboo, then we encourage the idea that these things are shameful. Which, yeah, I mean, this may be hard to navigate as well if sexuality conflicts with cultural or religious beliefs. So being from a strict Indian Hindu family where, you know, you shouldn't really use the word sex or periods for that matter, you know, it wouldn't be comfortable to sort of talk about that with your family members or your parents because it has some sort of just shame attached, or you just know that that's something that you shouldn't really be doing. Girls and women are often sort of left out in taking part of ceremonies if you have your period, which may be, you know, religiously valid, but the reasons behind this has never been explained to me anyways. So we've just been brought up by thinking that it's a bad thing, and this feeling of shame or negativity associated with your period is something, you know, that I don't want to be passing on to future generations. So I guess my point would be to have conversations with your children and explain to them the reasons why you're saying something, rather than having a closed door policy or just because I'm a parent and you should listen to me. Like, this wouldn't really get you too far. I also think being honest and open to conversations about sex will mean it's more likely that your child will turn to you for accurate information and answers rather than, you know, the internet or their peers. And you also don't need to have all the answers. In fact, not having all the answers can let young people know that sexuality is something which nobody knows all the answers to, and that it's different for everyone. It changes all the time, really. So yeah, children and young people, I think, will find it more helpful for parents to help them make their own decisions by listening, providing them with information or places to go for information, and helping them learn the skills to make informed choices rather than the parents telling them, you know, what to do, what not to do. So I guess just be honest and open and as accepting as you can be. If you do want more information about how and what to talk about with your children, have a listen to our other recordings which explore this in more depth.
Awesome. Thanks, Rashika. You made some really great points there. And yeah, there is a lot of simple things that parents can do which make all the difference in making their kids feel supported. And as you mentioned, for those listening, to have a tune in to our other 3 recordings, because we are going to sort of explore how to have these conversations with your children and what kind of content to talk about. I will go on to the next question, and that's for Susan. I was hoping you could let us know a bit about what happens when children and young people have positive interactions with their parents about their sexuality, because we know that there are a lot of benefits from this.
Yeah, Sarah, we do. We know that the early messages that children and young people receive about their bodies and their relationships and their emotional needs, they influence their understanding of themselves and others and the world around them as they develop into adults. Something I think is really important to know as well is that there was a really big survey undertaken with young people across Australia, and very clearly young people reported that they want to be able to speak to their parents about these topics. I'm saying parents as an umbrella term here, but really what we're talking about is trusted adults. So that can be anybody, that can be a auntie, an uncle, it can be anybody. It doesn't necessarily need always to be a parent, but certainly young people do want to speak to adults that they can trust about these topics. And the research we have around young people having these conversations with parents also shows us that when they're able to speak freely about sexuality and to ask questions, or when they receive really high quality sex ed at schools, young people actually commence sexual activity later, or when they feel more ready. They're more likely to have consensual sex, and they're also less likely to have an unintended pregnancy or to get an STI. So I think a lot of parents sometimes think that having these conversations with young people in their lives might in some way encourage sexual activity or promote sexual activity. And what we find is that the opposite is actually true, that it means that young people are more able to decide what they're ready for, to understand how to navigate consensual relationships and respectful relationships, and also know that they can come and ask questions and to speak to a trusted adult if they have any concerns or worries, or if something's happened that they're not comfortable with. So all of that, is incredibly beneficial for a young person. So basically being frank and open when talking to your children and young people about these topics encourages them to feel comfortable to talk to you as well. It'll help them to, understand and manage the different changes that are happening to their body, especially during young adulthood and during puberty, when emotions and bodily changes really kick into gear. And this can be a really confusing, stressful and lonely time for young people if there isn't someone that they can go to, that they feel unjudged by, and that they feel they can trust about these tricky topics that they're seeking to navigate. So really what's most important is what we teach young people when we go out to schools and other environments to speak to young people about sex, sexuality and relationships. One of the key messages that we give is around the importance of open and honest communication and of listening. And in having those conversations with young people in your life, you're modelling that. You're modelling the idea that asking questions and having open and frank conversations about your feelings and your concerns are a way to have healthy relationships with anybody. So this is all really about interactions, how we treat others, and how we'd like to be treated. And it's as simple and as complicated as that, but it's really very important. And there's huge benefits for young people to be able to have those conversations in a safe and non-judgmental way with people who they trust to give them clear, frank and loving advice.
Thanks, Susan. There really is so much that children can gain from having good conversations with their parents about their sexuality and all that comes with it. I think this ties in well with our next topic of conversation, because yes, definitely children are gaining a lot from these conversations that they can have with their parents, but parents can also get a lot of benefits from having conversations with their children about their sexuality. I know that parents have spoken about being concerned that their children aren't learning or implementing values that they find are really important for their family. So, Rashika, I wondered if you might be able to talk a bit about this and share any suggestions that you might have for how parents can integrate the conversation of values and beliefs into sexuality.
Yeah, definitely. So values are strong beliefs on what one thinks is important, what they value. And this comes in all aspects of life, including sexuality. They guide our behaviour and how we interact with others. So when talking to children about sexuality, parents can use these opportunities to share their values and let children know what you believe is important when it comes to things, such as how to treat other people. Children often use values and beliefs imparted by their families, communities, cultural groups to guide their behaviour. And I guess parents may not even realise sometimes that these values are communicated to children all the time, from the clothes and toys children are bought to the comments parents make about bodies and sexual orientation. Children can also see these values in the way parents act. For example, behaviour that shows children that relationships should never be cohesive, acting in a respectful manner. All these are things children will see and, may take on for themselves in the future. So I touched on a bit about cultural and religious beliefs and sexuality before. And of course, I acknowledge it is difficult to communicate your values and beliefs no matter where you're from whilst talking about sexuality to your children. But it's important that we let them know that different people will have different beliefs, and that's totally okay. And it's important to respect this. So, for example, going back to girls being excluded from ceremonies whilst they're on their period, as I mentioned, it's so important for girls to understand the reasons why, to ensure that they don't feel any shame. But it's also important for boys and people who practice different beliefs to understand that this is all right as well. I guess it really comes down to communicating, sharing and behaving in ways that support your own values and beliefs with your children, whilst also acknowledging people have different values and beliefs, and that it's to be respected. I think it's important that children understand your family beliefs and values, and they feel like they can make healthy decisions for themselves. So, I guess try not to shame children, even if they do question the values that they've learned or have been shown as they think about their sexuality. If you listen without being judgmental as your child explores certain beliefs, I think it will show that you're there to support your child as they explore their sexuality. So, yeah, just letting children know that they can talk about their sexuality, even if it may conflict with some of your beliefs and values, but letting them know that you're open to understanding what is important for them will allow them to feel comfortable enough to talk about this. And I guess also letting them know that there's, if there's anyone else in the family, like an elder cousin or a friend that they could go to, if they don't want to talk about it with their parents, like I probably wouldn't go to my parents if I had to talk about this. So I'd go to my sisters, but just letting them know that there are other people that they can turn to, or even if they want to talk to support services, you could let them know that this is an option.
Yeah, Rashika, those conversations can be a really great opportunity to better understand your child and what's going on in their lives, what matters to them and how they feel, as well as an opportunity for parents to share the things that matter to them and that they would like their child to sort of consider as they grow up and become adults. And I know that a lot of parents sometimes aren't really sure how involved to be when it comes to talking about sexuality with their children, especially because they receive education in school. But it's definitely something that parents can offer a lot of additional support and information on, because it's something that exists in the everyday aspect of our life and definitely not just in school time. So, Susan, I wonder if you might be able to just elaborate on this a bit more.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Definitely. So in Victoria, many young people will receive sex education at school or respectful relationships education, and that can occur in primary school and in secondary school, which is obviously fantastic. and again has been demonstrated to have really positive impacts for young people. But what we also know is that school is not the only place that they learn, that young people learn. Young people learn from TV, they learn from movies, they learn from each other, they learn from music, and they absolutely learn from you as well. So whether or not you talk to your kids directly about sex or sexuality, they will still learn from you about these things. They'll learn from what you do, they'll learn from what you say, and they'll learn also from what you don't do or don't say. So they might learn that there are some things you're not keen to talk about as well, and that can be instructive for them and can prohibit them from coming to you for advice and support when they need to. As I said before, this is really in essence a conversation about relationships and the relationships that young people in your life have with others, the way they interact and treat others, and the way they are treated by others. And those things will change over time. And so the conversation needs to be one that is responsive to the changes in young people's lives and to their complicated social context that they're in. And they need to know that you're there for them to have that conversation and to answer questions they might have, or if you can't answer questions they might have, which is more than likely. I mean, a lot of us weren't raised, as I said, to have these conversations and to have all the answers to these questions. It's a matter of saying that, I don't know, let's find out together, and, you know, being a companion to the young person in your life and finding out more about what's troubling them or what they have questions about. I really think it's important to know as well that you don't have to wait for young people to come to you. You can ask them questions as well. Ask them about their lives, ask them about their friendships and their relationships and their social life to get some sense of what's going on for them. If there's something that's concerning or worrying them, they may not tell you, they may not give you all the information, but what you are doing when you do that is signalling to them that you know that their life is complicated and that you're up for a chat if they need you. And you can certainly come to them if you have anything that's worrying you or that you're concerned about. And if you don't have the answers, you can find out together. There are so many opportunities that can come up organically to speak to young people about the topic of sex and relationships. You know, watching films together, starting conversations about relationships that you might see portrayed in books or in films that you're watching together, and just asking them what they think about that and why they think certain characters in, you know, a book or a movie are behaving in a certain way and what they think. And you can really, you don't have to sit down and have a one-off birds and bees conversation where you describe everything that happens in sex and then you're done. It's really an ongoing conversation, and one that you ask questions and you also are willing to be asked questions and to find out answers together and to really navigate this together with the young person in your life.
Yes, Susan, great points. There's definitely so much that parents can be doing to just support their children on an everyday basis, like very simple things about conversations about body parts. And I guess if you want to go into more detail as children are getting older, like you were saying, relationships and conversations about bodies and health and things that are being portrayed in movies and music, it's everywhere. And so we're sort of wanting parents to be involved or to be there if children have questions on an ongoing basis. So yeah, we are nearing the end of this recording. Before we leave, I was hoping to get each of us to just close with a comment about why they think it's important for children and young people to be able to have positive conversations with their parents about sexuality. So Rashik, if you want to start.
Yeah, so I think it's really important to start having these conversations around sex and sexuality. And, you know, I think these conversations are happening, but probably not as much as it should be happening. And it's all right if you don't want to begin with using the word sex as well. I mean, you know, I understand it might not be appropriate for everyone and all cultures to be using the word, but just opening up conversations around your body, feelings, attractions, all this can help make children feel comfortable and safe, and know that there's no shame in being their true self and that their parents are there to support them no matter what. What do you think, Susan?
Thanks, Rashika. I would say it's important because sex and sexuality are normal human things. Obviously, they do carry a lot of cultural and emotional baggage for all of us, but there really is no reason why they should. There's just nothing to be afraid of in talking about sex and sexuality. We talk to young people about their bodies, about their development, and about their interactions with other people constantly. So really that's all this is. I think sometimes the idea of talking about sex and sexuality might seem a bit more scary because we do know that sex and relationships sometimes can have harmful impacts on people, but the solution to this is not to not talk about them. It's actually to talk about these matters and to build an environment of trust and communication around it. And evidence shows that this is absolutely the best way to minimise harm for young people and to support them to live healthy lives and to make decisions that are centred around them and who they are and how they want to live their lives. So I don't think it could be more important.
All right. And before we end, I'll just close with sharing parents really don't need to have all of the answers, and children just need to know that they have a parent that they can trust and that they can talk to when they have concerns or question about stuff without being judged or to feel ashamed or to feel like they're going to get into trouble. Children and young people really do benefit so much from having a supportive and accepting parent to help them. Especially when they're navigating such significant times of change in their life. Their developing sexuality means that they're going through a lot of changes to their bodies and their emotions and their understanding of who they are and how to interact with those around them. So even if it is uncomfortable, start or keep going with those conversations that you're having with your children. They really can make all of the difference. So thank you everyone for listening to our very first recording. Not sure if you can tell, but this is our very first venture into recording a podcast. If you do want to hear more, please have a listen to the other 3 recordings in our series. We're going to be covering topics of puberty and how to support your child through that, as well as keeping your child safe online. And we're also going to run through some tips on how to have these conversations positively with your children. Thank you.